Hi, my name is Sean.
And I'm Andy.
And this is our spoiler-packed review for Venom. And if you're kind of new to my spoiler reviews, essentially they're podcast style. We hit record and we're going to just talk all the way up until I say thank you and tune in next time or whatever I say at the end of my videos.
Right.
And so there's not going to be all the editing razzle-dazzle, but a bunch of our biggest, bestest thoughts about Venom. And since this is spoiler-filled, if you haven't seen the movie yet, check out my spoiler-free review right up here. And if at the beginning of this, if you want to hear Andy's thoughts and you haven't seen the movie yet, we will kind of give his first impressions that will be spoiler-free before we dive into all the details. With all of that out of the way, go ahead and tell us your thoughts down below in the comment section. Did you love it? Did you hate it? This movie is dividing audiences. Like, the audience score right now is an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the critic score is a 30%.
I did not look that over.
Pretty big gap right there. And in the comment section on my spoiler-free review, there's a lot of people that really like this movie. There's a lot of people who think it's awful as well. So we should have a nice, lively discussion down in there. And this is a spoiler video, so spoiler away down in the comment section. No reason for any kind of disclaimers or anything on any of that. With that said, we're going to get started. We're going to kick it off with, what were your first impressions on the movie?
All right. I've been let down a lot by film. You know, I was first in line to see the last Airbender movie. I saw Suicide Squad, so I didn't know what to think about this going in. But I gotta admit, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I'm a Venom fanboy. I'm a Spider-Man fanboy. There was always the speculation that this wasn't going to commit to Spider-Man, right? There wasn't going to be that connection. And I gotta say, without tying into the MCU, right, this was still a really just fun film. It was action-packed. It had some horror elements. It had some comedy in it. I mean, some of it was definitely hit or miss, and it's not going to win Oscar. But, you know, I just really enjoyed it. I'd recommend at least seeing it if you're into some action, comedy, horror, or just want a fun superhero movie to watch.
So for me, I was more negative on it. The Venom-Eddie interactions I thought were great. There's some cool action inside of it, but the story kind of was the way it was structured. There were plot holes, and we'll dive into this all once we get into it. And then likewise, the tone, it just felt like each scene was directed by someone different at times. And so I while on an enjoyment level, I kind of agree with you. Like, if you like Venom, you need to go see the movie. You won't be bored.
No,
on a cinematic level, if you're not a comic book movie person, if you're not a Venom person, you can skip it because it's not a bad movie, or excuse me, it's not a good movie, but it's not a boring movie either.
No.
So from there, we're diving into spoilers now. We're going to kick it off talking about the tone. This is the big one that I kind of criticized, and I've seen a lot of reviews criticizing, is the tone of the movie. The movie kicks off, and we have like this horror sequence as the ship crashes.
Right. It felt like I thought it was funny because the ship's called Life, and I was thinking, the
movie Life.
That Life movie that just came out.
There was all this speculation when that movie came out, like, wouldn't it be amazing if this was like a setup movie for that Venom movie they did? Like, that was like speculation, and even with what they did with the movie, it kind of worked. And when I was thinking the exact same thing at the beginning of the movie. I was like, they really could have almost like Jake Gyllenhaal walks out, guys, get out of here. And he was the one that made it to the Earth.
I think it was Jake or Ryan, because you had this alien that was adapting anyways, which is like the symbiote. So, I mean, it just tied together, right?
It so easily could have, but,
anyway. We're talking about tone, right?
Tone. Yeah. So it's like this horror sequence at the beginning of it, and then that scene ends, it says Venom, and then it's like a day in the life of Eddie Brock. And he's...
and his girl, and, you just get the kind of slice of life, a little bit of romance.
And just kind of very big shift. Yeah. And it didn't feel real fluid. It didn't, the way, tonally speaking. And then you get into some of the stuff with the humor in it. Yeah. And in particular, the one that just stuck out to me was when Jenny Slate and Eddie are breaking into the lab, and they're riding up in an elevator. And she goes, it's an alien symbiote. And he goes, like E.T.?
Actually, one thing...
I hate it. I thought that was abysmal.
This is also going to sound weird. I was grateful for that part, because she calls them symbiotes. Symbiotes. And in the trailer, we heard symbiotes. And that's like her and Aang called Ang, in The Last Airbender. Either way, that was I was grateful for that. But
so, and I can appreciate the good part of that.
Yeah.
But the it felt like an improv joke where it was like, "Hey, Tom, go crazy. You can throw some jokes in there," and he goes, "Like an ET." Oh.
Well, this is kind of a weird comparison, but that might have been like kind of a, I don't know, attempt to do what the MCU does, right? Where there's a lot of improvisation.
Attempt is a key word.
Right, but I mean, at the same time, yeah, that was weird because we snap back, we see the symbiotes, in their containment cells, a lot of people dying, and then we go into this like new horror sequence with a little bit of suspense. You don't know what's going to happen, what's around the corner, and like a little bit of like heart beating as his old homeless girlfriend.
Right, and how stark the contrast is between E.T. and then the next scene he's walking through and it's like a horror movie and there's people beating on glass and then it jumps out.
Actually, that brings up another point, right? Is one thing I kind of dissed was the PG-13 rating.
Yeah.
And as we kind of saw these elements unfold, even if they were a little messy, they did really well for a PG-13 rating. I mean, I was really surprised that they had enough horror to kind of put you on the edge of the seat and enough action to really just entertain you.
Well, and that's what I've seen a lot of people saying, this is what you get when you do a PG-13 Venom movie. It's like, so you think that your biggest issue with the movie is that you didn't actually see the teeth go into the face? Like, if you saw the teeth go into the face, you go, oh, no, this is an A+. It's like, no. I mean, you might bump it up a little bit. Like I would have preferred to see a little bit more graphic violence as a grown man.
But, I mean, like, at the same time, they're trying to make this approachable to kids and family, and sometimes that's a hit and miss. But
and it doesn't drastically change the movie. It's like, it's like saying that because there wasn't enough salt on something, like a little dab of salt on something, the whole meal is ruined. Like, no.
And, we were also critical, I think we were both critical of Ruben Fleischer's ability to, do this, right? Yeah. And let's be honest, that is just good production and directing if you can handle this at a PG-13 rating. Because that's a huge thing, is people just aren't imaginative with some of that.
I think in that regard, I think he did a good job of having the horror, having people being eaten, people dying, dark humor without it, being in PG-13. In that regard, I think he did a good job. But I think the other tone issues, I think, would be part of his downfall.
Yeah.
And it kind of keep on the tone issue. I mean, even like the Venom stuff starts and, some of the ways they showed kind of Venom in where he's like, like very suddenly, I was like, that's a weird way to do this. Like, it's like just kind of goofy shock, Five Nights at Freddy stuff. Like, I mean,
like, part of that is also as Eddie and like the symbiote come together. Like, I felt like there were, tell me if I'm wrong, there were a lot of inconsistencies with like Venom's tone, or like Venom's like kind of, we need to invade the Earth, we need to save the Earth. I felt like that jumped way too quickly.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to Venom in just a little bit.
Right.
But so he starts doing this kind of jump scare stuff. Yeah. There's this motorcycle chase scene that I just thought was goofy. Like, whoa! I fell off my motorcycle, shoot my arms, and
that kind of goes into effect. I don't know if we're talking about effects, but like that kind of goes into the effects work, right? I mean, that was just kind of interesting how a lot of it was handled. You could kind of tell these cars were like, Matchbox or Hot Wheels getting turned over, stuff is getting exploded. And
just the way it was kind of like I don't know, like you said, tonally speaking, things didn't feel right in a lot of it. And then we'd have other scenes where it's like Eddie and Venom talking. It's like, oh, this is cool. This is what I want. If this is what the whole movie was, I'd be totally down for this. But then it kept switching to things that were not so cool. So tone was a big one for me that just didn't quite work right. From there, you kind of just touched on, so we'll transition using this special effects. I thought that they were very hit or miss. Yeah,
that was also, it was binary. It was on or it was off. And I mean, it was almost like 50-50 for the movie. Because I thought the symbiote fights when he turns into Venom, like when he's beating up dudes, I thought that was all incredibly well handled.
Yeah.
Besides the Wilhelm scream. But I really thought that was going to get, cut out post-production. But either way, regardless, I thought, the fight scenes were handled really well. The chase,
just some goofiness. And then like the one that stuck out to me is that the scene where the homeless guy gets the symbiote in him and dies.
Yeah.
And they have the symbiote on his chest, and the way they show like the outsides of it going into him is just faded out.
Yeah, it just
and so then it just kind of fades out. And I was like, I almost in my reviews could have like try and do an effect. I just didn't have time to do it because of stuff speaking at a retreat this weekend, so I'm actually quite busy. And so I had like this great idea for a bunch of stuff I was going to do with my review. And then I was like, I don't have time to figure that out. But it was just like, it faded out. I was like, that's like basic stuff.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like it's absorbing into him. It doesn't look like it's sucking in. It just looks like it's fading out.
Yeah.
And so that one to me was like, I can't believe that's what that looks like.
I also feel like there were some inconsistencies there, right, with special effects, because I think like when it goes into like Eddie Brock's neck, like you see the veins and everything.
Right,
like, this,
exactly.
You see, like his chest swell out, or it just goes through his clothes and all that.
And you see some and you're like, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then other times where it's just kind of like phasing back and forth between him and like in the ultrasound room, and it just kind of like starts showing the Venom face on top of him, and it was just looked like they were cutting between the two, and it's like that. It looks like a cheap effect. Yes. Like you didn't, whether that's the special effects or the way they decided to visualize it.
Right.
I don't know which one it is, but it didn't look good to me.
Yeah, and I don't know. There was a lot of weird stuff. Actually, one thing they did well on the effects is once we find out that the main antagonist, from a symbiote perspective, is Riot, right? And I want to go into some of my thoughts on that in a little bit too, when we get into characters. But like in the trailer, right, we see this entire room get cleared like invisibly. But once we get to the final movie, we realize that's Riot, who's clearing the room. So I thought that was nice to fix and address. But why have that scene in a trailer if it's
Oh yeah, we'll move on to talking about Venom and Eddie in just a second. But I want a rabbit trail on the trailers on this one.
Yeah,
I after seeing the movie, those trailers, what they decided to show, how they decided to show it, like. I mean, you've got the post-credit scene where he's at the prison.
Yeah,
they play out the entire last scene of the movie. The whole last scene of the movie of Venom eating the guy in the store. That's like your final like bit in the movie, and you're watching it, and because it wasn't in the main body, I was like, oh, that's going to be the last scene in this movie is going to be they're gonna tag the movie with that, and that's what they did.
I thought that was cool. It was cool, right? Because he has this relationship with the store clerk, the kind of odd on off, and then so he kind of avenges her, but also the tagline like,
why was it in the trailer?
That's what I'm saying. That was like also the tagline, right? Like, we can do whatever we want. Like you have that, and then you find out like that's at the end where they're finally like they're like working on the same page.
Yeah, like lines of dialogue from the last. I just couldn't believe that they had that much from the absolute very end of it, and
maybe that worked better, right? Because once again, pleasantly surprised. So maybe it was misdirection on purpose, but I'm very, very confused with how intentional a lot of this was.
I mean, I think that they were just put the first trailers out and there was no Venom, and then there was just one shot of Venom, and I think they just decided to overkill it and put too much Venom in there.
Yep.
And so they wanted to make sure you got that. I mean, to sell the movie, you have to get that relationship between Eddie and Venom, and so then they put so much of it in there, and they're trying to have like that memorable line. So because putting "turd in the wind" in the trailer got everybody talking about the trailer, and so in a marketing sense, that worked really nicely.
Right. Yeah.
But by having that, like, I mean, it's like a clip. I mean, it's a full 30, 40 seconds of dialogue. So anyway, let's just transition from there to talking about Venom and Eddie Brock. That's easily a highlight of the movie. That was so fun.
Like I said, character inconsistencies. I thought, Tom Hardy was on as Eddie Brock. I mean, there were some characterizations I can argue against, but I thought he did well, right? And I say this with respect because I thought Venom was a little bit more inconsistent, but collectively, I thought the interactions were on and on. And actually, that's something I was going to bring up. This kind of goes into a theory of mine based on how the symbiotes bond to people, is that it was less physical and more psychological. Because we get this line where Venom's like, we are a bit of a loser on our planet as well. And then it occurs to me that he calls Eddie a loser so much, but also Riot is kind of their like leader, right? And who does he bond to? He bonds to the doctor, right? The guy directed. So he bonds to a leader, and Venom bonds to a loser. So there seems to be a kind of psychological element to like how they're choosing their hosts or whatnot. Yeah,
and so there's things like that. It's like, oh, that's a cool, interesting idea that seems to have some intentionality that they didn't explore in the movie. Right, but anyway, but so like I thought their banter back and forth was a ton of fun. Like Venom had a bunch of these great funny lines just kind of thrown in there. Took a little bit too long to get there. But I thought that, like you said, that Venom is a little bit uneven. It was like this very sudden, like, no, we like it here. We're going to save Earth. Wait, where did that come from?
Right.
But like, I thought Eddie was written in a similarly kind of uneven fashion, because you look at the first 20 minutes of the thing, and he's like this big star journalist guy in town, and we have this whole history of how he could have had a bigger career. And then he sees an email on his fiance's computer, reads it, which I can believe he would do that.
Yeah, because he was like investigating.
But what I can't believe is that a professional, established journalist would do a gotcha maneuver like that.
Oh yeah,
because you'd get fired. Like because you would know you would get fired. You know you couldn't do anything with that. You know that they couldn't run. Like they don't give a reason as to why he was so desperate.
Well, and
that
he was into
do that.
two things, right? Is like he was like he's talking to his boss on the first floor, on the top floor, high rise. And, it clearly, like, has banter with the guy, like, rapport. And they also mentioned this, like, Daily Globe incident, which I thought was, like, a nice Easter egg, like a nice, tie into the comics. But, like, this guy is clearly an established professional. So that means journalistic integrity.
Yeah, and you just can't do that.
Yeah, if you get the information under the table, sure, take hits at this guy.
And there's things you can do with it. Like, you get information. Right. There's things you could, like... But the way it plays out, which is he's at the top of his game, and they're like, we want you to go interview this guy. And then he, like, reads the email, and it's just like, he just decides to go for it. And they didn't, like... It's not like he was about to lose his job and therefore he was desperate, or that they establish a certain like just reckless streak inside him. So they don't establish any sort of...
And that's also more in line with like the Topher Grace Venom, right? Where he's like trying to get up in the company. So that characterization made sense. He's desperate, he's hungry, he's scrappy. But once again, this one's like,
he's at the top. He's got his own TV show.
He's dating a lawyer. Engaged to a lawyer.
And so like that really bugged me about it. Like right from the get-go, I was like, this just feels like cheap TV show writing of like, hey, we got to get to the point. And if they'd tied it to an arc throughout the story, but they didn't. Yes. If they'd explored it, but they didn't. And so he felt, for that reason, very kind of uneven to me the way they decided to write him. And so that made me, once we got the Eddie Venom stuff, that's why I started to enjoy the movie a good bit more, because it was like, when we're just on Eddie, like this isn't developed right.
And it's kind of sad. Because that was well done. Is like he's a beat dog, he's a loser. But dang, was it kind of hard to watch, right? Because it's like, almost a little awkward because you're like, oh, this dude's like this dude's in the pit and he's getting like kind of kicked like, with his head down. Like, good night.
Yep. Yeah. it would. And it had to establish like how he's this total loser, so that you could kind of build it back up and stuff. But some of it's just pretty frustrating for me. All right, let's move on to the side characters. I'm sure we'll come back to Venom as we get into the story. But side characters, I thought one of my big issues is they were all very dull to me. Because Michelle Williams' character, like, what was her like? She's a lawyer and she's. Like, I don't know, what other words would you describe her? Like
a little tepid almost. Like, this is going to sound weird. I kind of like the chemistry between her and Eddie. Like, maybe it was too lovey-dovey when they were engaged and maybe a little forced. But I really liked the post-romantic phase, because it was very like, she put her foot down. She wasn't trying to get back in. At the end of the movie, there was kind of that like lingering thread. But I thought they handled that very well, and her boyfriend's also not a total, jerkwad. He clearly tries to help Eddie out, and I really, really appreciate that.
But I don't mean to be so negative.
Come on.
So that character type is a trope in a lot of superhero movies. Actually,
everything's a trope.
Very stock that you got the time gap, and then two people that work together that us as the audience are rooting for them to be back together. The way that they're kept apart is to put the jerk in there, but they don't want to establish the jerk as a reason for them to break up, because then it looks poorly on our girl. Yeah, so you have she's dating a great guy, and you can see it in Superman Returns, James Marsden. You can see it in National Treasure 2 with the guy from Modern Family. You can just see it in a number of these different things where they're dating a really nice guy that's being helpful. Like, he's doing good things, and he's not a jerk at all.
These are fair points.
And there's you see it in several different things. And so that's like, as I was watching, it's like, oh, this guy's kind of fun. Oh yeah, that's because this is a pretty stock, get a likable kind of character in there that's being helpful, but at the same time, it's like, we're rooting against you.
I gotta remember not to like movies, because you're gonna smoke me on the trope aspects. And
that's what when you start reviewing movies and watching. Like, I've already watched over 200 movies this year. I've watched over 50 that have come out this year. You start to pick up on these patterns and these like, oh, this character's in a lot of different types of movies. And it kind of robs you of a little bit of the enjoyment in some movies sometimes. But so I didn't feel like there was any of the side characters had sparked them. Like, I liked the rapport between Eddie and Michelle Williams' character, but it wasn't like as a standalone character, she was really funny or she was really this. Like, I couldn't describe a specific thing about her that made her distinctly interesting.
That almost makes her a lamp. You know, a lamp or whatever. You know, like you could, like she's in the corner of the room, and you don't really. She helped progress some elements, but that
and plot-wise, she's important. But the actual character itself, like she gets involved. She takes the Venom on. There's things that plot-wise, but the actual writing of the character, like what's distinct. Or even Jenny Slate, she's doctor person. Jenny Slate, known as comedian and done a bunch of stuff that none of the things that she's good at you see in the film.
Wait, time out. She's a comedian.
Yes.
Okay. See, that's okay. You got to draw that out. Like I wouldn't have known that. I didn't research that. Like, so you're not playing into her strength, and maybe that's because a lot of comedians want to type break. They want to
right. And go dramatic.
But I don't think Venom was the movie to pick if you wanted to go dramatic. And
it was what's odd about it because it's not like if she wants to go dramatic that she gets to shine or something. She's just kind of like random lab person that has a little bit of a conscience, I don't mind doing a bunch of unethical stuff, but when we start torturing people to death, now that's
actually that goes into one other thing, right? Eddie Brock, he's talking about all these homeless people getting buried in the landfill, and it kind of heavily implies that doctor guy. Okay, wow, I just forgot the main doctor's name. That's probably indicative of how I even perceive the movie. Either way, main bad dude is
Riz Ahmed's character.
Yes, exactly, Ahmed. Riz Ahmed, he's freaking experimenting on these homeless people.
Yep. It's like there's a recurrent thing, right? So it's not a new thing. It's a little bit of did she not know, or maybe that's another plot issue.
Blind eye,
and she hadn't watched someone die yet. But we'll get into story in just a little bit. Speaking of Riz Ahmed, have you seen Nightcrawler?
Yeah, no way.
So that's the cameraman.
Oh man, I didn't know.
Yeah, and so he's right, and he's very interesting actor, and that movie is filled with amazing performances, and so he starts shining in this movie, and so then they put him in Rogue One as generic rebel guy, and then in this one,
to be fair, in Rogue One, they also took one of my favorite martial arts actors,
Donnie Yen.
Not just Donnie Yen, but. Oh wait, yeah,
that's Force Awakens.
Okay, Force Awakens.
You're talking about the raid guys.
Yes, yeah. So Iko Uwais and the other raid guys, and but either
great sequence to showcase their skills.
But all that to be said, you definitely have some interesting characterizations with the guy. But I also liked him because he maybe it wasn't as played out as it could have been, but he had this kind of scathing, cynical, snake venom, social engineering side to him, where he was just nice dude, good with kids. I don't know. It was very interesting to watch on screen.
And he did when I he's so negative. He did a good job of acting the way he was supposed to act. Right. But it once again kind of feels so this is kind of like a different version of Lex Luthor, isn't it? In the kind of the billionaire, that's kind of running stuff behind the scenes.
Actually, and that's a good point because a common villain trope is every villain is a hero of their own story. Hey, I know that one from the comics, but all that to be said, I feel like sometimes you just need to because when you get into characters like the Joker, they know they're evil. So when you have Lex Luthors and stuff, it helps a little bit when they are evil.
Yes. All right. So then we get to our main villain. It's Riot.
Yes.
And I thought that once that all kind of came together, I was cool with all that. I'm
actually going to apologize to you because I straight up leaned over to you and said,
"It's carnage." We're in the middle of the movie. It's carnage.
I thought I was right, but
sorry. And we're at a movie theater, Alamo Drafthouse, where they literally start the movie if anyone during the movie talks, write their name on a card and we'll kick them out. And then Andy's like, it's carnage.
I got one warning, okay?
That's right, you do get one warning, so we were probably going to be
I'm still sorry to anyone who was at the, South Lamar, Austin, Alamo Drafthouse. That's on me.
Yeah. So he shows up. I thought the characterization, how that all played out, I thought worked. Yeah. That wasn't my issue with it. When we get into the story side to it, I will have some with the story wise. I think there was some structural problems with that.
I've also got some issues. I'll go into this with some canonical things.
Okay.
I think I noticed, but that's a little later, I think. Or Well, or now, or
if you don't have any other thing to add on Riot, so we liked Riot.
Yeah,
like the actual visualization, the fights
also,
and stuff.
this dude was throwing out. I mean, to quote Venom, he's throwing out. Crap you've never seen before. He was throwing out blades and that's why I thought it was Carnage, because Carnage is the first known.
Well, because in the Asian market scene at the beginning, throws stuff, and then we talked about that in our video a few days ago. Carnage throws stuff. So I was like, could they be? Because I was thinking it's possible. I don't know details about Riot because we didn't do a video on Riot. Yeah, but then obviously it was Riot.
Well, and that's like, okay, so you know what? Forget it. Okay, so that's why I was confused, because I think if I remember correctly, Riot is a like second or third generation symbiote. So like he's born from Venom or Carnage, or somewhere down the line. So that's why I was confused that like Riot was on there with them and maybe like kind of superseded Venom in like whatever hierarchy they've got.
I wouldn't know about those things. You're the expert on that one.
Oh, I still need to catch
From there, we'll move into the story in general, specific and storytelling, all of that kind of fun stuff. And I'll say, I like that it was a standalone story.
Yep.
That while it has kind of Easter eggs, and then you have the tease and the post-credits scene of where they could be actually going with Carnage.
They have to at this point because, and once again, Carnage canonically, is Venom's kid. Yes. So I think there's going to be some sort of internal struggle. Venom's going to have a spawn, and then like it's going to Cletus Cassidy's going to escape, and then
we'll get to post credit scene expansion there. So they that they did that. They didn't try and tie it all together, because that's Amazing Spider-Man 2. That was the problem. They tried to tie everything to everyone, and so they just stuck to one single story. Mm-hmm. And so I like that aspect of it. I like kind of the mythology they were establishing.
It was also that you brought up Amazing Spider-Man 2. That was also a safe thing. Sony learned a lesson here, because allegedly they've got a trilogy. He signed on for a trilogy, but they didn't make it enough that they're really losing a lot of story. Like whereas Amazing Spider-Man 2, you had the whole Sinister Six lined up, and then I guess this. Trilogy just became a duology, biology. Okay, that's a different thing.
It's a different word.
Okay.
But structurally, the way it kind of comes together, I think there's some plot holes. Mm-hmm. And then this is what the movie felt like to me. Okay. It felt like they wrote a movie where the main villain is Riz Ahmed's character. Mm-hmm. Riot wasn't in it.
Yep.
And the story's about Eddie investigating. He gets Venom, and he's being tracked down, and they're supposed to tear down the Life organization. That's the big finale. And then they read the script and they went, man, we have to have a bigger comic book ending to it. And so then they did a real quick rewrite on it where they went, okay, well, how about instead of the ship getting back to Earth, it crashes. One of them gets out. Mm-hmm. And so then we can have this kind of time jump in here. And then we're tracking these two stories. And so you can see where this story over here about Eddie, for an hour and a half of the movie, it is the same script as they had before, and then it's like, all right when we need to have our big, gigantic comic book movie finale, Riot comes in, jumps on to Riz Ahmed's character, and suddenly and this is where suddenly Venom changes, I like the Earth now, I want to stay here. Actually, and then we add in this mythology all about how they want to take over the Earth and things like that. That's what it felt like to me. They took one script, I'll let you talk just I know. They took one script, and then they did this weekend rewrite on it to add Riot into it so you could set some of that stuff up. And when I feel the rewrites as I'm watching it, it frustrates me.
Yep. And gosh, I think the rewrite is real, because something that there was a lot of criticism for was that there were there was too little Venom in the trailer. So I think they were kind of playing it off a little bit more dramatically, is there Venom? Is there not Venom? Is he in your head? And, eventually they were like, oh, we're not getting a lot of good press because there's not a lot of, we need more symbiote. We need a lot more symbiote in this film. So I think that's what led to Riot and a lot of these symbiotes being much more over and violent.
And I heard that there was 30, Tom Hardy said something there's 30 more minutes of him.
I think he said 40.
Yeah, there's a bunch of, and it's tough to know what to do with that, because every movie's I think mechanical cut. I don't know. It's somewhere like
the commercial cut.
The first one that they do, they put all the footage together. It's not trimmed at all. Theirs are always about an hour longer.
Yeah,
and so sometimes that can be misleading when they say that number.
Director's cut, right? I mean,
it's even before that.
Okay.
There's one even before really the director's cut.
I did not know
that it's not really a watchable version of the movie. And so sometimes what they'll talk about the cut of the movie that's an hour longer, and so people are like, oh wow, there's an hour of deleted scenes. No, it's not that there's an hour of deleted scenes. There's probably about 15 minutes of deleted scenes, and then there's just a bunch of just crap on the front of every shot of the movie because all they did was take all the footage that they had and put it in order, and so it's like the flow of scenes and things like that. It's none of that, and so it's tough to know if that's what he's referring to. If like there's just little sentences here and here, or did they have these big subplots about Eddie and expanding things that they pulled out of the movie? In which case, this adds maybe some of the frustrations that some of us had with
and that's what I'm also confused by, right? Because, well, one, there's a joke flying around, or I saw, a Reddit comment, suggesting that these 45 minutes, right, were like just 45 minutes of, Eddie Brock chilling in the lobster tank.
Right.
But part of it's like,
That's right. I forgot about that. It's really funny, but once again, a totally weird thing in the movie.
Yeah, and like it kind of, it canonically makes sense, like, to the movie story because he's, hungry and trying to eat stuff, but still weird. That being said, yeah, like Tom Hardy said these were like his favorite 45 minutes of the film, and I don't know if that's like I don't know.
That's a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what this. There's a specific word for the cut of the movie that I'm forgetting what it is. But so for me, because of the way the story worked, it seemed like there was some big plot holes in it.
Yeah.
So I talked about the Eddie Brock one of earlier on of him. Why would an experienced journalist do this? Yeah. Like he would know the end result of this. It doesn't make sense to me that he would do that. The other big one is that the way the story works is that the symbiote ship crashes, gets into this Asian woman during the first block of time in the movie, and then 6 months passes, and then in that time all sorts of stuff happens over here in San Francisco, and then our story kicks in with Eddie Brock, and I didn't think there was any story reason given in the movie. Why is that the moment that the Asian woman that's infected gets on a plane and then passes it to the child?
Yeah,
what's her plot
doing for 6
months? Like, why is it that the time? Actually, is there any plot reason that you're aware of?
No, but it does actually bring up a good question, right? Maybe it's just about Riot, right? Maybe he's just more durable, but like, why was Riot, like, because like two of the 4 symbiotes died, right? So why was Riot able to survive?
Jump around from people to people.
Right, but yeah, exactly, because he jumped into, paramedic who was like already dead pretty much, jumped into an Asian lady, then jumped into a little girl. So and then Doctor Guy, who was like, the only, as far as I would tell, based on the psyche theory I was going with, the only viable host.
Right.
So
it was, 6 months in our Asian lady.
Yeah, especially since that's an little old lady. So she ain't got enough meat on her bones to sustain like big violent symbiote. Is all I'm saying. I don't know. It was
right, and that's where that's where to me it felt like a rewrite where they were like, man, we got to put this in here, and so then they added this kind of plot thing into it to give that finale that you kind of want in a movie like this, and we get that, but at the cost of a lot of the logic.
Yeah.
And so if you guys know, if like we missed something, was there like some signal and then the symbiote some line like that would explain why Riot 6 months later? If the movie took place over the span of a week, it would make sense. Like, oh yeah, these things are happening in parallel, but it's not. And so if there's a 6 months gap, why would right then Riot decide to travel to San Francisco right then?
Because that's another thing, right? Because Riot knew it was the Life Foundation. Mm-hmm. And also Riot theoretically could have just ridden inside a host to the Life Foundation. I don't know, there seemed to be like a lot of weird inconsistencies. Yeah. I mean, like you said, but I don't know.
Oh, and then my third one. We get to the end, so we get in the middle of the movie, the SWAT team's trying to track down Eddie, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, he walks out, hands up, Venom comes out, Venom tears he's throwing guys around there. I'm sure they don't all die, but the SWAT team is tracking down Eddie Brock. We get to the end of the movie, Eddie Brock takes out Riot.
Yeah.
And then the next scene is, I got my job back.
Well, and like, okay, wait.
Where did the police go?
Well, to be fair, you got to remember the SWAT guys were like private. I'm assuming they were privatized security for the Life Foundation.
That's why somewhat why I asked. Like, what? Yeah. Like, was your interpretation that they were for Life Foundation?
Yeah, because they were for the Life. Because you had like the scary bald dude, right? Who
he was in that group when he went to the newspaper place.
Yes. Yeah.
In the part where you take the elevator down because he's a pussy and won't jump out the window.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that was one of my favorite bits of Venom. But so you got him there. You got him outside waiting for Venom, taking orders from Riz Ahmed's character.
Okay.
And you got him in the torture chamber with Riz Ahmed when they got him strapped to a chair, and he headbutts the crap out of him. Like Eddie headbutts the crap out of this dude.
So I might have just had it in my mind because watching the clip, in my mind I went, oh, so he fights the SWAT team at one point. So I might have just written that at the end of my mind, so it wasn't. But it could have been off there.
They also might have been like trying to appear as a SWAT team, so it looked like normalized from someone you know outside. I don't know.
So that somewhat eases what I said there. There's still the side to it of his face is associated with all sorts of carnage throughout the city, throughout the span of the movie, where he'd be on all sorts of security cameras. People are being beaten up everywhere. And then it's like, hey, you got your job back.
Yeah, she just brought up a good point, right? Like, you were talking about the SWAT. It's like, where were the cops in this movie? Right. Because, this dude wasn't Venom for, maybe 78% of the movie. Just hard number, 78% of the movie. I don't know. But, so where were the cops? Where was the CCTV? Where were people saying, that dude's flying 50 feet in the air on a motorcycle?
Right. Did you think that perhaps that would get on the news? Wait, and there's scenes in it where Venom's there and there's people with their cameras filming it.
Yeah.
And sometimes the head goes back and his face is right there. And as the movie establishes, everybody knows who Eddie Brock is in the city of San Francisco in this world.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's like the that whole, that Batman theory where everybody knows, that Bruce Wayne is Batman, they just don't talk about it. So maybe the entire city, hear me out. Maybe the entire city of San Francisco and the Bay Area knows that Eddie Brock is Venom, but they just don't do anything about it. I'm just saying, fan theory. You don't have to believe that. Yeah.
So this is why I know some of you guys loved it, and because of the humor, because it was funny, because it was fun, because you love Venom. I'm tracking with you. That he's in that camp right there. He's with you, and so he's here with me in person. So he's being a little bit friendlier, and when the camera's not rolling,
I'm on your side.
He's on your side a lot more than perhaps even in his videos. When I'm frustrated by it, it's because I'm watching it, and when I see this is a character just lifted, it's just a trope lifted and plopped in this movie. That's a great actor that's not given much to do.
Yeah.
Why is Tom Hardy waving his finger, making goofy ET jokes? Why did Riot just show up at this specific point in time in the story? Why is this whole side story just like this thing running over here while we clearly have this established story? Oh, they merged together and we got our third act. That's how it works. It's the side. Oh, they merged together. And
you also bring up one of my favorite, I don't know if it's a trope, I'm sure it is, but one of my most hated sci-fi, sci-fi action, whatever tropes is this rocket's just ready to go. They got a rocket. I'm sorry, a rocket. Ready to go. Oh, I need this thing off the ground in 5 minutes. That doesn't happen. I don't care how advanced it is.
Right. And maybe that's kind of going back to my rewrite theory of all right, so our big thing at the end of the movie is we'll have the rocket and they're going to take off. Oh, yeah. And so then there's no real logic to it because of course I've got my rocket ship ready to take off. And maybe that's why it seemed to get sloppier as you got towards the end. So I need to look into this if there are a bunch of stories about the rewrites on this. And there was several different screenwriters credited on it, so it seemed like they passed it around a little bit.
I was going to say, that might be a big problem, right? But
we'll find out. Or maybe someday we'll find out. All right, from there, we'll move on to there's a post-credit scene. And in the comment section on our previous video, talking about who is Venom, some of you guys are like, it's clearly established that Riot is the villain. We're like, hey, we're not denying Riot. Right. We're not saying that's not happening. We're not saying that who that person we're seeing is Carnage. What we're saying is there's good reason to believe Woody Harrelson is in this, and there's speculation that he's Carnage, and so there could be some sort of reveal that they're not showing to us.
Come on.
And that seemed to be a little Carnage tease right there. Woo! Something about the name of the character, his appearance, and then he goes, "There'll be a Carnage when I get out of here." Yeah, whatever he did.
I mean, and that's the thing. Tom Hardy, or Eddie Brock calls him Cletus Cassidy. It's clear this dude's also it's clear he's bad. And in the comics, he's insane. He's off the hinges, and this dude's writing something we don't see what in blood.
There's not many people that do crazy better than Woody Harrelson. That guy can act, and he can act crazy. crazy.
Actually, let's also address the fact that, I mean, Ruben Fleischer works with this guy a lot, you know, because he, like, you know, it's funny to see Woody Harrelson with the, like, curly Annie wig on, but, like, at the same time, you know, that's cool that Ruben Fleischer would bring him in on an ambitious project like that, like this. I don't know if ambitious is the right word.
That was a nice little, I'll say that I've been, you know, I had my issues with the film, and I'm overstating some of the negative. I'm understating how much fun I had with it. I had fun with it. I was laughing with all the jokes. The action scenes were cool, so I'm underplaying a lot of that stuff.
But I think it's good that you can separate and acknowledge your critical side as well as your, you know, your fun-loving side, right?
And if you know my rating system, essentially I have a letter and I have a number. And the letter's kind of overall quality, and then the number's kind of generic entertainment value, how much I enjoyed it. And for me, anything below a B- is I don't recommend it. Anything below a 6 is I don't recommend it. For this one, I gave it a C, not recommended, 6, slightly recommended. And so I did. I was this. This is what my score was essentially. So understand where I'm coming from. That's kind of my take on it. Any kind of closing thoughts on this one?
Man, you know, I just really enjoyed it. I think that, you know, at the end of the day, you can say a movie's bad, right? You can say, oh, yeah, you know, the Tim Burton Batmans or something like that. Or, you know, I don't know, the original Hulk with Eric Bana. Or, like, and here's the thing, like, you know, we got to take risks. The only reason why we have the MCU is because people are trying things out. Sometimes crap sticks to the wall, sometimes it doesn't. But, you know, and I'm not saying, you know, this is crap or a turd in the wind. You know, I'm just saying that at the end of the day, you know, at least Sony's still trying, maybe to the chagrin of others, but at least they're still trying, and it kind of feels like they're getting better at it, like they're nailing a niche down. And maybe we see them enter the MCU, maybe we don't. But, you know, I'm kind of excited to see what lessons they learn and how they proceed.
I can't imagine Kevin Feige watched this movie and went, let's tie this to the MCU. I'm pretty sure he's like, yeah, let's keep that over there a little bit distant from my stuff.
He's most likely in the ivory tower saying, we must watch. We must observe. Just kind of, I don't know, he's masterminding things, you know? So let's kind of see where it goes. I mean, you know, from a fan perspective and from a, you know, Marvel director and producer perspective. I don't know.
So thank you guys so much for watching. Tell us your thoughts down below in the comments section. I'm sure Andy will be around in the future. We've actually been talking a little bit about maybe having a second channel. We've explored some ideas like that. If you guys are wondering, tell us what sort of what videos would you like to do with us together talking comic booky stuff. Tell us down in the comment section also about that stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.